want to thank everybody for joining us. I'm Assembly Member Joseph Lentol, and I represent the 50th Assembly District, which is comprised of Fort Greene, Clinton Hill, Williamsburg, and Greenpoint. And I hope everybody here tonight and your loved ones have been able to stay safe and healthy. That's first and foremost my wishes for you tonight. These are challenging times, and I've been working with my staff. You see Eric who's monitoring the program, and I don't know how long Emily will stay on, and all the rest of my staff through the pandemic to help the people of this community with the challenges we face. There are some issues that are raised every day, each day, that I feel deserve special attention, and that's why we called this meeting. Unemployment application problems are first and foremost, I'm sure, for every legislator in the state. Small business issues are huge, as well as renters' rights. We are joined tonight by presenters in each topic, and we will address these topics one at a time. Our presenters are experts in their fields, and I want to thank them for spending a very valuable time with us. The format of tonight's event will be 3 half-hour segments, each one with a presentation and a question and answer period if time allows. And after a half an hour, we will move on to the next topic. So let me briefly introduce our presenters before we begin, because they're the experts. I mean, I pretend to be an expert on everything, but I'm really not. Rachel Gold is our presenter on unemployment issues. She's a former Deputy Commissioner, Department of Labor, and an Assistant Attorney General under then Attorney General Andrew Cuomo. Rachel now works at Abrams Fensterman as a very able attorney. After a half an hour, we'll switch to a presentation on small business issues from Randy Piers, President of the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, and our new Commissioner as well of Small Business Services, Janelle Doris, both of whom are on the front lines fighting for our small businesses and our economy. And after another half hour, we'll be pleased to hear from Virginia Reboe from Williamsburg, but now in Fort Greene and Clinton Hill. The Impact is the name of her organization, Impact Brooklyn, a highly regarded expert on renters' rights she is, and an issue that is a priority these days for everyone. Impact, which was formerly known as the Pratt Area Community Council, as many of you may know it by its former name, is an organization that has deep roots in our community reaching back to 1964. I particularly respect their depth of experience, historical perspective, and deep knowledge on all community preservation issues. And just one final note, I want to remind everyone to please fill out the census. Can't be any more important now than ever there was a census. If you have not done so, please do it. New York is far behind the rest of the nation in response, and that'll mean federal funds and representation in Congress for us, which we are going to need desperately in New York State, the funds that is. But it is critically important now, more than ever, that we get counted. And just take a few minutes and go to 2020census.gov. You can fill it out, very simple. So now I would like to get started with the program. And first up is Rachel Gold. Take it away, Rachel.
Thank you, Assemblyman Lentol, and thank you for hosting this and having me. And good evening to all of you. I know that there is a lot of hardship and anxiety around all the topics that the Assemblyman asked us to discuss tonight. So I'm just going to jump into that. I'm going to give you an overview of the process and some of the issues right now that the Labor Department and those processing the UI claims are dealing with. I'm going to address a few issues that the Assemblyman's office asked me to address, and then we'll take questions, okay? So, with that said, first of all, you can apply online or you can call. I'm sure most people who want to talk about this have already applied, but if you have not, and you find yourself in the unfortunate position of having to do this now for the first time, they're asking that everyone apply online because of the volume right now. They have set up certain days that people can apply. So if you're A through F, you apply Monday. If the first letter of your last name is G through N, apply Tuesday. If it's O through Z, apply Wednesday. And they are accepting applications for anyone who misses those days: Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. They've actually onboarded thousands of people just to deal with these claims. So they really are working 24/7 right now. And I can personally tell you, I have friends who are still with the department who have not had a day off since early March. So they really are trying to work these through. So once you get into the system, which was the problem in the beginning, some people weren't able to get on, what do you see? Well, there is now one application. So for those of you who started dealing with this way back when in March, there was originally the usual unemployment insurance application. You had to fill it out. If you were denied, you then had to go and do a separate application for the pandemic unemployment assistance. That's no longer the case. It is now a single application. And if you are eligible for one, you are eligible for the other, and they process it as a single application and a single process. The first thing that they have to do is find out if you're eligible. And there are two things that they look at, right? The first thing is the base period. And what's the base period? It is a complicated mathematical, well, it's not really that complicated. It's complicated for me, who specifically went to law school because there was no way I was going to make it through a science program of any kind. And what they do is they look at the wages that you've been paid in the last full 4 quarters that you worked. So if you got laid off in March, the last full quarter you worked ended in December, right? And if you worked that entire period or that entire year, your last 4 quarters are January through December of 2019, okay? They look at what your highest paid quarter was. If that was at least $2,600 and was at least 1.5 times, or at least was 1.5 times what you made for the full year, then you're eligible. It's a fairly low threshold, especially for most people applying right now, meaning that numerically, you're gonna get your benefit. The next thing they need to look at is how much you made. And based upon what your highest quarter was, that's going to determine what your benefit will be, up to a maximum of $504. All right. There is usually at this point a waiting period, meaning, okay, thank you for your application. Thank you for us having a chance to look at your wage eligibility and your amount. There's now a 1-week waiting period before you can get any money. That doesn't exist. The legislature, the governor, they worked it out. You get benefits from the day you lost your employment. People are still, I understand, waiting, even though they may have applied at the beginning of this. And we've gotten some questions about what that means. Everybody who applies is going to get benefits back to the first day that they became eligible, meaning the first day that they became eligible for unemployment, the first day they were out of work. All right. And that includes people who are still now getting processed. A friend of mine literally got 9 weeks this morning. Okay, that's after weeks and weeks and weeks of working through this. But they are depositing or sending home the debit card with the full amount back to when you were originally eligible. It's not all coming at once. Sometimes it will come for the last 2 weeks you did it, and then they're taking time to fill in whatever the backlog of weeks was. But people are automatically eligible for the full amount from when they first lost their benefits. And in fact, the United States Department of Labor has told the state labor departments that they should go back, look at people who they've rejected, and see if anybody is eligible going back to the federal eligibility date, which is January 27th. So in terms of processing this first round of applications, what DOL, the state DOL, is saying is that there is very little backlog at this point, and the following are the three categories that they're stuck in with people still waiting for benefits. Once they do their own analysis, there are a slew of requirements that the federal government has: documentation, verification of certain status before payments can just be made. This whole system is done through a trust fund process that the federal government controls and the state draws down on. So for the state to get the money to give out, it has to comply with these regulations. And as of this weekend, they're saying that most claims have moved through, even if the checks are still a little behind in being produced. And the three categories of people who are still being held up are either missing information, have not certified their claims, or there is something suspect that is a suspicion. There's a suspicion. I lost the word. I apologize. There's a suspicion of fraud in the account, and that doesn't mean you've necessarily done anything wrong. It could mean that your social security number has been swept up in something. It could mean that your data has gotten stuck in some other file. I know that's not something that's going to be that's going to comfort anybody, but that's why Joe's office has people working on it. They and I are in touch, and some of these individually very complicated things we will work through, and we'll get to those. But stepping back to the more generalized information for a minute, they're going to probably want more information from most of you, especially if you are delayed in a claim, because it means you've fallen into one of these categories, and they'll be reaching out. DOL staff is working from home, many of them just like anybody else, and they've onboarded a lot of temporary staff. So please answer your phones, even if it's a private number, even if it says potential spam. They're trying to leave messages, but a lot of this back and forth and failure to communicate is because I do it too. I don't answer numbers I don't recognize. But if you're waiting to hear from a state agency, please pick up the phone, have your documents together, and answer their questions. They are not going to ask for your social security number or any other identifying information until they are able to verify with you that they know the last day of employment you put on your application, and they know the day that you filed your claim. So you'll be able to verify that you're dealing with someone who's actually from DOL. Okay. Remember that there is also, right now, it's been kind of put on the wayside, but there's also a period generally where the employer responds to the claim. So in the normal course of business, an employer will get a piece of paper that says this person applied for unemployment insurance. Are they eligible? Meaning, were they fired for cause? Or are they actually someone who is ready, willing, and able to work, but there's simply no work for? And that sometimes delays the process. If an employer has offered you work or has asked you to come back to work and you've refused, that employer is supposed to have reported that to DOL, and that can jam your claim up behind between some stop work. Again, something that we need to deal with on a case-by-case basis, and we will help you work through if you need to. All right. After that process has been gone through, what you're going to get in the mail is a monetary determination. And again, not a math whiz, but essentially you take your highest quarter, you divide it by 26, that's your benefit, up to $504. On top of that $504 from the state, you will receive automatically right now an additional $600 from the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. That's only through July 31st. That is if you have been laid off in full. One of the things that they're doing without shared work, which is something some of you may have heard before, without the Self-Employment Assistance Program, which some of you may have heard about before, you can nonetheless get partial benefits. So as long as you are working fewer than 4 days a week and you are not making more than $504, you can get a partial UI benefit for each of the days that you're actually out of work. One of the other things that they're saying is holding this up, I mentioned it before, but it comes in play at this particular point in the process, is certification. Even if you have not received your check, even if you've not received a single check, you should nonetheless every week go into your NYGov account and certify. What's the certification? That you are still unemployed, that you are ready, willing, and able to work, and a series of other questions that simply says, yes, I'm still eligible, please send me my check. There have been a number of people who went through the first process, who got their application in, who were caught in this delay, whether because the system crashed, it has since been rebuilt. The state has since rebuilt it. But there are several people who went into it who, because they didn't hear back within a week, didn't certify the weeks subsequent to that first week. That will stop your claim in its tracks. Continue to certify that you are ready, willing, able to work, and eligible for UI, even if you have not yet received a single benefit. They're not going to move those claims forward if you don't have the certifications in place. Again, something they're supposed to be calling you about, but huge backlogs, and so please let us know if there are individual cases that seem to fall into that black hole someplace. One of the other things that the law now allows is that you usually would only be allowed to have 26 weeks. There will now be 39 weeks of benefits available. But again, the additional 600 payment is only through the end of July. So at that point, you'll only go back to a maximum of 504 a week, but you'll be able to receive it for a total of 39 weeks as opposed to the 26, which is usual. All right. That is kind of the bird's eye view of the process, who's eligible, how they calculate it, and the issues people are running into right now. There were a few questions sent to me. I was asked to address these issues, so I'll do that quickly. How do I get the retroactive benefits? Okay, you do nothing other than comply with the process. You should be getting, once you start receiving checks, you should be receiving checks that go back to your first date of eligibility, which, because the governor waived the waiting period, is the first day you were without employment. That is on your application, and that will automatically be the date you become eligible. You need to do nothing else to get the back payment. But you do need to certify for every single one of those weeks. I got a question that said, what if it's not allowing me to certify? That is, again, one of those technical, possibly computer issues that we're just going to have to help you with. So please let us know a little bit more information so we can follow up on that. But the general rule is you do not need to do anything for the back payments. Chances are you either didn't answer the call from DOL to give the missing information, or you didn't realize you should keep certifying because you hadn't yet gotten the check. How does the application process for self-employed individuals work? So this is very important, especially in your district, Joe, right? So a lot of people that would normally not be able to get benefits, gig economy workers, independent contractors, freelancers. These are people who are usually not eligible for unemployment insurance. They are currently eligible under this scheme. So you simply go through the same process as everybody else. And because of the federal law, which changed the criteria for eligibility, which now includes this broader category of individuals, you will be able to get your benefits just like everyone else without any special process. I was not clear if this person was asking about something called the self-employment application process. And if that's the case, then let us know, because that is a separate program with its own parameters, which includes training classes and which include mandatory meetings. And you would be eligible right now without that very regimented program. And it certainly will be, your regular claim will be processed more quickly than an application for SEEP right now. So if I missed the point of that question, then I apologize for that. The last question that I was asked, and I actually have 35 seconds left in my presentation, so yay me, it's asked me, how does my adjusted gross income from line 31 on Schedule C affect my determination? This is somebody who's obviously self-employed. I don't know if there's subchapter S that would be relevant. I'm not a tax attorney or a CPA, so my very my very practical advice, based on just having had to deal with this, is that it's going to be the amount of your wages, et cetera, on your 1040, and not the amount on your line 31 that should be impacted, that should impact this determination. And again, the maximum benefit is 504. So it's unlikely that your total gross profits are going to be less than that. So that being said, it is now, I've now done my 15-minute presentation. And how should I just listen to questions, or how should I proceed?
So, Rachel, we have some questions coming through in the chat box. Are you able to see those?
I am. Here we go. Okay. This is someone who's, all right, there are some specific questions about specific people. And so I guess what we should probably do is say that I will help the caseworker in your office to work through those individual problems, because these are not general questions for the general public. And we're going to need very specific information to get back to the DOL reps with SS and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Thank you, Rachel.
Sure.
Kind.
No, happy to help with that. If you apply to have a request for reconsideration, will you get back pay for regular UI benefits? Yes. If you are approved after your request for reconsideration, you will be paid benefits back to when you in fact were eligible for them. Do you have to get a confirmation number? There is not necessarily a number generated, but you do have an NY.gov ID, which is the account you use to get this information and communicate with DOL. So if you haven't received any confirmation, an email or anything, then you are probably caught in a black hole of some kind. I would start the application from the get-go. After the system crashed, they not only rebooted it, and I think probably ran into some problems as a result, but they also changed the application, because the federal government had required this two-step process. So if it is a very old application, I see at least one person here applied on the 19th of March. Chances are your application is unfortunately lost completely, and you should just go back and redo it. That is not going to jam you up in the system. And again, Joe has caseworkers and will help work you through these individual, more complex issues. If I made a mistake on my application about being willing and able to work, don't call, redo your application, do it correctly. Remember, you must be ready, willing, and able to work. If you are not available to work, then you're not eligible for UI. And similarly, this is something I'm dealing with quite a bit lately. You know, people are being called back to work, and for one reason or another don't want to return or can't return, and people are losing their jobs as a result of that. So you need to be ready, willing, able to work, and you need to certify each week that you're still able to accept work in order to accept benefits.
Rachel, I just want to ask a follow-up question to that. The I made a mistake question. I've had a couple of people say that they clicked on the wrong option and that ended their ability to file an application, like they couldn't go back and correct it.
Meaning that they clicked I'm not ready, willing, able to work, and they won't even let them go back in and start a new application from the get-go?
Yeah, that's the impression I get.
Is that a sweeping problem, or that's like 2 or 3 people we can call DOL and say, hey, you've jammed this person up in your system with this incorrect contact?
It's just a handful of people, yes.
I think that's something we should get a list, get their identifying information, and let me send that list to someone and say, hey, everyone's in this category, this is what they did. Because that's probably one of those things that fell right into the fraud category. It was probably red flagged because somebody changed their answer to a basic eligibility question. And so it probably ended up being red flagged for fraud, and now it's taking a while to undo, when in fact it was simply someone not understanding what that language meant. So let's pull that list together, and then I think we can help them.
Thank you.
All right, of course. Someone's asking me a tax question, not a CPA, not a tax attorney. In fact, I should hang my head in shame, never even like took Tax 101 in law school. But you can file, I know this, up to at least 3 years in back taxes. So you can still do 2018 now. I don't know what the financial consequences are going to be to you, but you should just file if you are supposed to file, and you can file back. Generally speaking, there are no penalties. If you are owed a refund, then the government just owes you, right? So if you're owed refunds, you should have no problem going back as far as you need to, as much as they'll allow. I applied 4 to 5 weeks ago. I have pending. Okay, this is one of these people who falls into one of these 3 categories. You have either not certified every week, so I think you should go back and see if that's the case. If you haven't gone in on every Friday or whatever, every Sunday, to say, yes, this week I didn't work and I'm still ready, willing, and able, then you should go do that. If you haven't heard from DOL yet, if you have done your certifications, then that you should probably fall into the list that Eric is mentioning, of people who we're going to have to handle on a casework basis. But first, please make sure that you've certified for each of the weeks, going back to the first of the 4 or 5 weeks ago, because they're not just cutting checks if the people didn't certify when they do finally get around to processing that as a backlog. Okay. So yes, you should generally expect a check within 2 to 3 weeks. The question is whether or not there's a time frame. 2 to 3 weeks. I told you, I know people who are just getting their first check today and have been eligible since the beginning of March. That person did in fact kind of screw up her information. She found out after many, many, many attempts. So again, please make sure that you've done your certifying, make sure you haven't missed a message from DOL, make sure that everything that DOL is saying they need from you, in fact, you have provided. And if not, let us see if you're in an individual situation that requires some help. I do have an email address, and I will share that at the end. Sure, absolutely. What if you've been approved, but the amount is much lower? Can you fight that? So the amount is determined based upon the amount of your wages in the base period, and it's statutorily set what the parameters will be. The maximum is $504. If you got $100 and you thought you should get $500, then yes, there's an appeal process. That appeal process is on the same system that you originally applied in, and the appeal process is essentially, I don't know how quickly it's working through right now, quite frankly, but there's an extensive appeal process. There is first an appeal within the confines of the Department of Labor. Liability and determination section will take a look at what it is that you're challenging, what the determination has been, and give you basically a second opinion. If you don't agree, you can appeal your position to the Unemployment Insurance Appeal Board, which is a separate entity from DOL, and you will there get an opportunity, 1 for a conference and 2 for a hearing before an ALJ, an administrative law judge. From there, there's actually another level of appeal. The Unemployment Insurance Appeal Board will hear appeals of hearings and appeals of legal arguments that were brought up before the ALJs. And then there's my favorite, which I'm doing quite a bit of right now, which is actually bringing appeal in the 3rd department against the Unemployment Insurance Appeal Board for decisions they made as an agency. So there's an extensive process, and quite frankly, that aside, they're really looking to streamline this and give the benefits to people. I spoke to a friend of mine yesterday who's still there, and I can't even believe the floodgates they've opened to how quickly they're trying to process these. So start at the agency and try and clear it up. You shouldn't have to go through an elaborate appeal process, okay? Okay. No back pay. Well, I don't know if you're reading. So someone's telling me that last day of work was March 22nd, but that someplace on their account, it says May 5th. So is May 5th the day that you filed your application, and perhaps you made a mistake on that application? Instead of putting March 22nd, you put May 5th where it said last day of employment. That's the kind of thing that are jamming these up behind long waits. So check those screens, check those fields. If one of us, if someone can help you, we'll certainly do what we can. If you're requesting, if you're eligible for benefits after reconsideration, it will go back to your original date of eligibility. That's yes. If we're talking about, a lot of these are just, I'm waiting. I don't work for DOL, so unfortunately, I am not in the loop on their data breach, to answer one question that's popped up a few times. For these people who are asking me about how long it's been, please make sure you've certified. Make sure the fields are full. Make sure you're not missing any information or haven't sent information they've asked for. If you really at that point realize that you are just in this black hole because of all of the computer issues they're having, then let us try and help you. My email, because I'm now past my time and I see there are many questions here that I don't want to just abandon people on, is rgold@abramslaw.com. So RGOLD@ABRAMSLAW.com. And just seeing how many questions are here, I know I'm going to regret that, but hopefully we'll get everybody squared away and be able to help you.
I think we have time for a couple more because we started late.
Okay, sure. How is the weekly amount, the benefit amount calculated? Very generally, if you take your last 4 quarters of work and you look at your highest quarter and you divide those total wages by 26, that is your, that's the wage, that's the benefit up to $504. That's the general formula is the word I'm looking for. They received an email that their claim was complete, but we never spoke with them nor had the opportunity to input any employers. They got the same amount. It is, so here's what they may have done. Along with many others. All right. This story is about somebody that said they got a text that their claim was complete, and then they all got the exact same amount of money, which is $182, which is a fraction of the 504. So the amount is not an unusual amount to get, and because they're clearing up backlogs in swaths, chances are that they did in fact reach out to people in large groups. If the amount is incorrect, that's a different issue. I would not presume from the fact that you all got the same amount with the notification at the same time that that's something that we need to be concerned about. Every time I try to certify, the system times out and signs me off. Yes, it's been everybody's experience. The system is overwhelmed to the point where they actually had Google come in and rebuild the whole thing. And if I told you what the rebuild looked like when I was there 1,000 years ago, you would be very surprised at the level of technology they're working with. All they really can do about that is apologize, tell you they're working the best they can, and hang in there. And in fact, people do ultimately get paid. I promise you, even when we have to work through each of the cases individually. Call back. It's a technology bandwidth issue. It's not something that is going to be fixed overnight and is one of those horrible elements of this we just need to deal with for right now.
So
yeah,
Rachel, I think we should probably pause here and move on to the next topic. But I think I speak for Joe as well, saying thank you so much for this presentation. And for anyone who has a very specific question, as Rachel suggested, send her or me the question, the details, if it wasn't answered just now, and we'll try to get you the specialized help that you need.
Thank you. I'm going
Thank
to
you,
listen to
Rachel.
everyone else if that's okay.
Thank you, Rachel. That was excellent. Really well done.
Thank you.
Next up is Randy Piers, President of the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, and our new Commissioner of Small Business Services, Janelle Doris.
So I'm going to defer to our commissioner. So Commissioner, feel free to kick us off and then I can pick up after you, Commissioner.
Thank you for coming, Randy, and thank you, Commissioner.
Good evening. Thanks, Randy, my good friend for many years. Assemblymember Lentol, thank you so much. Eric, everyone on your team and others working. And Rachel is just amazing, all that information. I was taking lots of notes, so thank you so much for your information. Everyone, my name is John L. Doris, and I'm the new Commissioner of the New York City Department of Small Business Services. Before that, I was the lead on the city's Minority Women on Business program. And I'm so happy to be here to talk a little bit about what SBS is doing. We have one of our team members here as well. She will be coming on to answer some questions along with all of us. But we really want to let you know that we understand that the local economy is really the driver of our economic engine here in New York City, and small businesses are the key to that. As many of you know, when this crisis hit, the COVID-19 crisis, this pandemic, we had set up two particular programs, New York City Business Continuity Loan Fund and a Employee Retention Grant program as well. And we were able to get some funds out, but that program was overwhelmed because of the overwhelming need that we are experiencing now. And we just want you to know that SBS is here for you if you are a business owner, if you are a job seeker. Our Workforce One centers are operating remotely, and we're here to support you as well. Our business solution centers are also operating remotely, and we were able to connect you with 40 of our lenders and philanthropic funders to connect you to the necessary resources that you need to run your business. Our Workforce One centers also is here to help the job seekers, those who are looking for work, either in essential services and or just need to get your skills up a bit so you can get back into the market or look to pivot to other opportunities. The employers that we're working with, 150 of them, to fill 1,600 positions in the 5 boroughs. They are in healthcare, grocery stores, grocers, pharmacies, delivery companies. And so we have a lot of opportunity there for you. We also heard from our small businesses that, of course, rent is a challenge, legal support they need, and also to work with them on fraud prevention. We know that business owners are facing really enormous financial pressure now and uncertainty in the market. And so we wanted to let you know that, even though the governor's put in a moratorium on evictions, there's no assistance for rent. And so what we've set up with some of our partners is the Commercial Lease Assistance Program. And if you need help in negotiating with your landlord to make adjustments on your lease, please feel free to reach us at nyc.gov/COMM lease. We'll put it in the chat box so you have it. So if you have any issues, that's free legal advice to help you with negotiations and or speaking to your landlord. I'd like to say also, we are working with the City Bar Justice Center. Recently launched a new initiative, again, for free legal assistance to support small businesses to help navigate insurance-related issues. I don't know if many of you have experienced this, but the insurance companies have not listed the COVID-19 pandemic as a covered event. And because of that, they're unable to pay out, but they're sitting on $800 billion and so in reserves. And so, look, we are pushing for the insurance company to list COVID-19 as a covered event. And we need your support to keep pushing that to our federal partners and others so they can get to do that and help motivate the insurance companies to do, I believe, what's the right thing. I just want to say a few things about SBS updates and our technical assistance and support we have for you. As the weeks continue to pass, we know really it's hard for you guys as small businesses out there. And really, when the mayor tasked me with this job a week ago, he said, listen, I need you to save as many small businesses as possible. We got to do everything we can. We got to turn over every rock, look at every crevice, to every leaf, everywhere we can to find the necessary resources to help every small business we can. And that's what we are doing. Many of you heard of the PPP loan. And I know Randy may talk a little bit more about that as well, and some of the products his organization has. And then the economic injury disaster loan and the EIDL loan. And so we want to make sure that you are well aware that there's still $100 billion in this program, and SBS can help connect you to those resources. I'll cut this short because I want to really get some of your questions. If you have any questions or concerns or need any kind of assistance as a business, you can just go to our website, and we'll throw it in the chat box as well, nyc.gov/COVID-19 BIZ. Again, nyc.gov/COVID-19 BIZ. You'll be able to see all the resources that SBS has for you, and make sure that you're able to participate with that. For those who have restaurants and are thinking about, what's our reopen process and what we're going to be doing in order to make it safe, and, for you to come back and open up. Just remember that all restaurants still are open for takeout and delivery, but not sit-in yet and dine-in yet. But we are working diligently with the Mayor's Small Business Advisory Council. Randy and I just actually came from that call to this call. And we're working on some of those same issues, and we're looking to soon to make sure that we release some sort of guidance or some sort of recommendations as we begin to open. And so right now we want to hear from you. That's why I'm on this call, and I appreciate the Assembly member for inviting us. But we want to hear from you. What are your concerns? And so that as we begin to open up, that we can actually take those concerns and put them into action. So thank you all for having me. We will continue to advocate on the federal level to make sure that PPP is available to all the small businesses in New York City, and also help you to get not only with the federal government, but our private lenders and our private financial institutions that we work with to loop you into that so that you can have the resources that you need. Randy, you want to add anything?
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Assemblymember Lentol, you're our true champion for small businesses. Thank you for having us. Your team is great.
Thank you.
Eric and Emily, I have to give them a lot of credit. So a couple of things here. So the Brooklyn Chamber, since day one, since we shut down on March 13th and shifted digitally, we repurposed our staff to really cover 4 areas for the business community. First is what we call business interfacing and communications. That's about keeping in touch with businesses on the ground so that we can tell the story of the impact. I like to say we need to be your eyes, your ears, and your voice as it relates to what's happening, so that policymakers and legislators and the press and the public in general understands the impact. And make no mistake, this is an impact like no other. I mean, I hear a lot of people try and draw the analogy between 9/11, which I was at the Brooklyn Chamber 9/11, Superstorm Sandy, and or the Great Recession. This is nothing like that. So we have to, in some ways, kind of rewrite the playbook in terms of how we're going to help small businesses through this. And even with that said, we know that of the 63,000 businesses in the borough of Brooklyn, 84% of which have less than 10 employees, there is a very real chance that a third or more may not return, right? So we fully understand what's going on and the pain that many of you are experiencing. And we are unique as the epicenter because we have no full timetable of reopening, right? And that uncertainty has led resources that one may receive. But back to what we're doing. We've got 20 professionals on the ground who know the communities throughout and know the businesses, business interfacing and communications. The 2 things you need to know, and I want to point out my colleague, Samara Karasik, is on the phone. She is adding these links to the chat box. But we have a COVID-19 resources page that's specific to businesses, right? So it doesn't cover the health stuff, but it covers what you need to know as a business owner. You can go to our website, brooklynchamber.com. It'll be in the chat, /COVID-19. And it's your sort of one-stop shop to access information related to whether it's reopening guidance, whether it's programs and services, whether it's our webinars, which is part of our technical assistance. It's all there. The second piece is technical assistance. My commissioner, I can call him my commissioner now. He's been my friend for many years, but now he's my commissioner. He is a partner. We are their partner, SBS's partner through the Business Solutions Center. I will underscore the legal assistance component. I just made a referral tonight for legal assistance around a lease issue. There are landlords who know that it's kind of a quandary for them because they can't engage in evictions, but the rent bill is accumulating. So they're trying to cut deals. And by the way, the deals may be honorable and you should talk to your landlord, but seek some legal advice before you actually make a deal. And we can provide you with that free legal consultation through the Business Solutions Center. So thank you, Commissioner, for bringing that up, because I literally just made a referral to that this evening. We're doing technical assistance webinars. Samara has put our webinar schedule in the chat, I believe. We just did one, which I call, we got the PPP, now what kind of webinar, and it's really about trying to kind of work through the complicated issues of how to use the money so that it'll be forgiven, and under what circumstances do you deploy it. So I'm going to get into that in a second. Advocacy, Commissioner also mentioned, for example, business interruption insurance. I will mention that one of our Assemblyman's colleagues, Bobby Carroll, has a bill that is sponsored in the Assembly, and there's a companion bill in the Senate, Senator Gennardis, to address the issue. And maybe, Joe, you'll probably get into that a little bit later, but business interruption insurance is a huge issue. Non-covered events. It's almost unconscionable that the insurance companies are not honoring this, and we are seeing some action on the state level. The Chamber is the voice to help advocate for those types of changes. And lastly, there are businesses that are functioning in the communities. There are essential businesses that have not stopped functioning. We've had great manufacturers, for example, who have shifted their production to make essential PPE equipment during this crisis. We have your restaurants that are doing their best through the takeout and delivery system. We have your grocery stores. We have some cleaners. We have pharmacies in your community. By the way, these folks are heroes too, and they're working pretty hard, and they've got concerns and issues. What we've tried to do, particularly with the restaurants, is to promote them, let you all know that they're open, and the best way in order to order from them. So we have a campaign called Tag Your Takeout. Tag Your Takeout is take a picture of your takeout, hashtag Tag Your Takeout, post it on social media and on our app, the Brooklyn app, and you can win a gift certificate. It's a way to kind of give some love to the restaurants, and it's a way to kind of have some Brooklyn pride and spirit out there as well. So we're doing everything we can to try and provide one-on-one technical assistance, or through our webinars. Our webinars cover a series of technical assistance issues. Once again, we're putting that schedule up in the chat. We're shifting a little bit of our focus now to recovery and what recovery is going to look like. The Commissioner is leading the way in terms of the guidelines on recovery based upon the type of business. Whether it's a restaurant, it's going to look different than just a retail shop versus a yoga studio versus something else, right? So all has to be worked through, but it's a good sign that we're thinking about recovery, right? That means the timetable hopefully will be clearer in the next couple of weeks. And then lastly, to that end, and I should mention PPP. So some of you are asking, is PPP still available? The Paycheck Protection Program. This was the signature program in the Federal CARES Act. 2 rounds of PPP funding were let. The first round was not very kind to small businesses at all. This was the round that was let in April. Only 4% of our businesses, our small businesses, reported that they were able to access a loan the first time around. However, the second round, which was let in May, 3 things happened that shifted the dynamic. Number one, our community development financial institutions, our CDFIs, of which New York has some really, really good ones. they were able to make loans this time around. They are the ones that generally worked in underbanked communities, and they work a lot with the MWBE community as well. So they were able to make loans. The second thing is the financial tech companies like PayPal and Cabbage and others, they actually made about 13% of the loans the second time around. So that was another option for you to apply for a PPP. And then third, the larger banks got the message for the bad PR from the first round, and they actually were much more responsive the second time around. So we had a 92% hit rate according to our survey data on the PPP for the second round. Now, if you haven't accessed PPP yet, if you haven't filed your application, I need you to send us an email at bcc-covid@brooklynchamber.com. We will direct you to a source for you to apply, because there is still money available. But if you've already applied, you still may be waiting for it to be processed. And then for those of you who've gotten PPP and are wondering what to do, there are a lot of tricky issues. The forgiveness provision, the provisions for forgiveness have just been released by SBA. We have them on our resources page. So you do have to meet those provisions if you're going to seek forgiveness for the loan. It can get complicated. We can guide you on some of that if you send us an email, but it is complicated. We also have a PowerPoint up on our page that goes through it for you. 75% of those funds were to be used for payroll. In New York, that poses a particular challenge. If rent is your highest fixed cost, New York is a high rent city, and as the commissioner mentioned, it is one of the changes that we've been pushing for with respect to the PPP program. But the other challenge that many of you are facing is, I don't know when I'm fully going to be able to reopen, and I only have 8 weeks to use these funds. And by the way, I have to bring my employees back before the end of June, so the timing may not work very well. So it's tricky, and there's a lot of complications that you need to think through. I will say this, however, at the end of the day, the forgiveness provision is important. But even if you don't get the entire loan forgiven, it's still a 1% loan, right? You're not going to find any loan of 1% elsewhere. I'll end with this, and I think the commissioner wants to say a few more words on this, but I'll end with this. There are still going to be businesses, smaller businesses, that will get shut out of any type of financial support. Brooklyn Chamber understands that. We have a CDFI. We're not a big guy like Pursuit Lending or Axion, but we serve only Brooklyn, and we serve micro businesses. So our loans are small, $500 up to $1,000. But we launched a campaign, a crowdfunding campaign, in order to capitalize no interest fund. We've raised $180,000 so far. These are recovery loans. It's bringbackbrooklyn.org. It's the Bring Back Brooklyn Fund. So it's easy to remember. We'll put it in the chat, but it's bringbackbrooklyn.org. It's a way for everyday Brooklynites to help restore their neighborhoods by helping their small businesses get online. That's really what it's about. So spread the word. I know Assemblymember Lentol did a video endorsement for us. We thank you for that. It's going to follow with some others. And we are very, very grateful for that support. But the more money we raise, the more money we can get out the door to support the small businesses. So with that, I will end my remarks, turn it back to the commissioner, and we can answer any questions.
Thank you, Randy.
Randy, right before we jump to moving forward, just wanted to flag the business interruption insurance bill that you mentioned by Assemblymember Carroll. Joe Lentol, he does sponsor it. So fact check that while you were talking.
Good. Yeah, I knew he did.
Thank you, Randy. And, it's great to have good friends in this business because, over the years, we've seen what you have done for Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn, of course, right there, Crown Heights and Flatbush. And now I'm a Queens guy. So thank you for giving me my Brooklyn card to come back every now and then. You and the assembly member when I was working over there in the 20th Senatorial District for some time. So anyway, well, thank you all for this opportunity. Listen, SBS has been, really strategic in making sure that webinars are available And I just want to say in multiple languages, and we do it, I think in 5 or 6 languages, and then all of our materials are printed in about 16 languages or so. So this is important because we want to make sure that everybody has access to the resources that we have and provide. I saw as a couple questions in here. I think one, Randy, maybe we can start tackling a few of them. I'm sorry, Assembly Member, how would you like to do this?
You can do that, but Eric has probably the handle on the questions, unless you.
Eric has the gavel. Okay.
No, for once, Joe, I don't. So Commissioner, the questions you saw, go for it.
All right, so there was a question about how do we apply for PPP? They called their bank Chase and was told that they were not going out with any more funds. Okay, here, and then also about fraud. So I would say that if a governmental entity is sending you information, generally speaking, it should have .gov at the end of that particular email. And if you're not seeing .gov, then you're probably not speaking or talking to a government entity. Okay, so be careful out there. A lot of folks are sending things and having our businesses post their personal information and their business information online. So we have seen some of that fraudulent activity. So please be careful and make sure that it says .gov. The other thing about PPP, you can either reach out to us, you can reach out to Randy. Our email, I think, has also been popular. I have Miguelina Asteri. She's also on our team at SBS. She's here as well to answer questions, but also is helping us populate the chat box. If you have any questions concerning PPP, just email us. There's still other financial institutions out there, including CDFIs, who are helping folks. So we will connect you if you need to be connected with someone. Randy, you see any others in there? I only see. Okay.
There's one more, guys, about issues around bars and
Hi,
music
Samara.
venues. Hi, Commissioner.
Good to see you.
Congratulations.
Thank you, my friend.
So about music venues, bars, how are they going to reopen? What's that looking like? And I mean, we can talk about what we're advocating for, but we'd love to hear where you guys are at, Commissioner.
Yeah. I think we would rather hear from you only because this is what's happening. We are compiling, and as I mentioned, Randy and I just left the mayor's advisory council a few minutes ago. We're compiling the information. We're getting the information, and we are logging it, and we are putting it into our plans. We're not going to open without hearing from the community what you feel is best. Right now, we don't have a timeline, as Randy said. There's not a sure end date to this, but we are building right now our resources, but also our plans to make sure that when we do we implement something, right, that we are able to do it in a way that is not harmful to businesses, all types of businesses. The second thing I'll say is that we're going to have a sector-based and industry-based strategic plan, right? It's not going to be one size fit all. And so we need to make sure that that's why we're out. That's why I'm here. That's why we're about hearing from folks, so that when we put the plan together to bring folks back and to open up, we're doing it in the right way. So happy to hear from you, your thoughts, so that we can log it and take it back. And so that as we begin to build these policies, we're able to do so in an effective way. So if you have, I don't know if anyone has thoughts on it, please make sure you share it with us. Our emails are there. We want to hear from you as well. I don't think
and may I jump in about the bars and restaurants, just from the chamber perspective? So we are advocating for outdoor space. We are all expecting right now that at least when we reopen, we're going to be operating at less capacity than normal. We're going to have to keep social distancing. So we need to make sure that people can use their outdoor space. We're working with our partners in the hospitality industry to advocate for that with city council members. To really loosen those restrictions. There was a bill that was passed last week that did waive fees for the outdoor spaces because it's unclear if people are going to be able to use them.
Yeah.
And so there is a lot of discussion about how we can better use these outdoor spaces. I'm sure you've seen a lot of our neighborhood businesses are offering drinks to go And so for people to be able to socialize with each other after they get their drinks to go, we need to have more open space. There's a lot of discussion about what that's going to look like. How can we use our street space? How can we use our sidewalks? How can we do more plaza work with Department of Transportation? So all of these things are on the table and being actively discussed. We're also bringing them up with our city council members. We're all very concerned about restaurants, bars, music venues. I mean, you know, we all kind of think that the music venues are going to be one of the last ones to come back because we can't have large gatherings. That includes sporting venues, music venues. So, you know, these are all ones where we're trying to figure out how we can make them safe for people to come back and for these businesses to reopen. But, you know, we're still working around a timeline that's unclear.
Tomorrow we're gonna do this.
Hey, Samara, I have a tough question for you, or really more of a point than a question, is that with some of the bars that are doing to-go drinks, we're getting a little bit of a buildup of the to-go cups and that sort of stuff, but not necessarily at the bar, but in public spaces like parks. And I don't know what the answer is, but it might be something to think about going forward, because we want the businesses to succeed and come back, and we know that this is part of it. But we also don't want to create large amounts of litter and garbage in our parks and other public spaces.
Yeah, I mean, quality of life is something that's really important. Including, I mean, I'm sure in your neighborhoods in Brooklyn too, right? Like there's gloves everywhere. People are just like throwing them around. So these are all things that we need to address for our sidewalks to be clean and safe while people are outside enjoying the weather. I think that's a really good point.
Well, thank you very much, guys.
I mean, I will just end by saying this. You know, if there was ever a call to shopping local, this pandemic should be the wake up call to the extent you can support your local neighborhood mom and pop small businesses, because literally the neighborhood as you know it, the community as you know it will change if we don't save these businesses. And you could do your part. You could do your part simply by saying, you know what, I'm not going to order online. I'm going to order down the block, you know, at my local retailer. That's how important this is. So I would encourage everyone to do that.
Randy, let me ask a follow-up on that. How much money does that local store lose when we order online instead of by calling or going in?
Oh, you're talking about, well, the restaurants, you know, the city council just passed a bill to cap third-party delivery fees for the restaurants, which is good, but still you could avoid delivery fees altogether if you just order it by phone and go pick it up at the restaurant. And then 100% goes to that restaurant, right? So it might be a little bit of an inconvenience, but it's I think it's worth it to just provide that extra support for that local restaurant.
Yeah, we absolutely agree. We want to make sure folks are engaging in their community. That's why we've been engaging in our bids, you know, in our chambers, of course, Randy and others, however we can help support them. But you know what? We all have to participate. We have to buy from them. We have to engage them. And it's a bit easy, right, to stay home and click a few buttons and then have things delivered and dropped off. But let me tell you, there's nothing more important than the small businesses of our communities, really, who are the fabric of our community, right? I mean, my small businesses that I know, they know your name. You know, you grew up there. You know, they know what you like to eat. You don't have to even say anything. You walk in the store, John, I got you, right? I mean, that's what we want. We don't want to lose that, and that's what, you know, my job is here, is to really make sure that we save as many of these small businesses, but really save our communities, because when we save our small businesses, we really save our community. So thank you for having me on, Assembly Member. Great to be on with my good friends, Randy and Samara, a former colleague and friend. So thank you all again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Commissioner. We really appreciated your participation tonight. And Randy and Samara, you were excellent. Thank you for all the work you've done in our community in Brooklyn.
Thank you.
Next.
Yep. Next topic, Joe.
Yeah, next topic is renters. And we're lucky, really lucky to have Virginia Rebow of Impact Brooklyn to is our next presenter. Virginia, you're on.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Virginia Reba from Impact Brooklyn. I am going to share a screen with you and speak basically on new renters' right that was passed on May 2019, but I also would include updates of things that are going on because of the epidemic.
Sure.
Okay. So it says host disable attendee screen sharing. I don't know if Eric, you could help me with that. I can't share the screen. It's my first time that I'm doing it, so I do apologize for that. I'm trying to share my screen. I actually had problems getting on board before, so let's see.
Yeah, Virginia, I think we'll need to make you a co-host.
Oh,
We'll get that squared away.
great. Thank you very much.
There we go. All right, so now you have a co-host capability. So at the bottom there should be a green share button.
Yes, I was able to see it. Thank you so much.
You are very welcome.
So let me see if I can find it here. I thought I was going to have problems, and I'm sure here it is. Okay. So it took a little longer than what I expected, but it was successfully, I hope you guys can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
I can see it.
Okay. Well, once again, I thank you for letting me join you, Joe, and your team. For me, it's a privilege. So is it for Impact. So we'll be discussing a few things new rent laws that went through on May 2019, and then we're just gonna jump into things that are actually happening now. I could tell you a little bit about Impact. So Impact is a nonprofit organization. We're located in Bed-Stuy, and we have several departments. We have homeowner services, financial literacy, housing development, economic development, social service. That's a building that we have with single room occupancy, affordable housing, and my department, which is community organizing. So in the community organizing department, we have people coming in, any problems that they have with their repairs, harassment, we will be taking care of. We help people identify what kind of tenants they are. Sometimes people don't know if they're rent stabilized, if they're rent control, or what kind of tenants they are. So we help them identify what kind of tenants they are and tell them their rights as their tenants. So if you're rent stabilized tenants, you have a right to at least for 1 to 2 years. There's a lot of laws that will protect the rent stabilized tenants. And how you know if you're rent stabilized tenants, your building must be built before 1974, must have 6 or more units, a J51 or 421 tenant exempt, and that's what landlords get as a tenant break. They get a tenant break, but they also have to have certain amount of units for rent stabilized tenants. Another way that you can know if you're what kind of tenants you are, you can call for a rent history. When you call for rent history, you would know if you're rent stabilized tenants or if that landlord, when someone else moved out, just made that apartment unregulated. So these are laws that we have to make sure that are being taken care of. So we do advise our tenants to look for a rent history. If you need your rent history, all you have to do is call for one. It just takes 1 or 2 minutes. And I can put it in the chat. Their number is 718-739-6400. And that will be giving you an idea of if you're a rent stabilized tenant. Here we see exactly what I'm talking about, who's a rent stabilized and who's not a rent stabilized tenant. And this is very good to know because according to what kind of tenant is what kind of rights you have. So before the new rent laws, which we've been fighting for new rent laws for a very long time, fortunate this year, we were able to get a lot of laws passed to benefit the tenants and not the landlord. So if you're a rent control, rent stabilized, or 421 or J51, you have more rights than if you're a private tenant owner, but still they have rights as of this year. Vacancy bonus. So when a tenant moved out, the landlord had the right to bring up the rent 20%. And if the vacancy increased in 8 years, they had the right for an additional 6%. So someone moves out that's been there for many years, they had the right to raise it 26%. Now with the new laws, they don't have that right. They could just raise it up. The vacancy bonus could be increased only what the rent guidelines board has said. So, and that was in effect immediately. They also had something that was called the tenant blacklist. The tenant blacklist, landlord paid companies to collect names of tenants who had complaints or had sued them or sue any landlord in the housing court, refusing to rent to these tenants because they were in the blacklist, considered like troublemakers. Now the new rent law says it's illegal for the landlord to use a tenant blacklist or to threaten someone not to rent to them because they're in that blacklist. So I lost my place, I'm sorry. Eviction protection. A landlord was able to put late fees in the lease, whatever late fees they considered. This no longer stands. The court can issue a stay of eviction up to 6 months. In other words, if the landlord would take you to court, he had the right to give the late fees and you had 6 months to move out. Now with the new laws, you have 5 days. After 5 days, they can charge you your late fees. It's only $50 or 5% of your rent if it's issued in your rent. If not, he cannot charge your late fees. The court can issue a stay eviction up to a year. So landlord takes you to court. He cannot evict you up to a year. You can go back to court and say, I still haven't found a place, and you have children, elderly people, so you have the right. The judge will prolong your stay. Instead of 6 months, it will be a year. And landlords are required to provide notice of 90 days to tenants before they raise their rent. And they can't raise it more than 5%. Now with the new laws that are passing now, we want to make sure everybody knows about the succession rights. So if you're a rent stabilized tenant, you have succession rights. So for instance, if you decide to move and your children are living in that apartment, or a relative or close family members living in that apartment, and you could prove that they've been living there for at least 2 years, that person is entitled to that apartment with the same amount of rent that the prior tenant pays. So if I rent an apartment and my daughter's staying there, she can stay there with the same amount of rent. When the rent is up, the lease expires, they can bring it up due to the rent guidelines. So if it's 1.5% for 1 year, 2.5 for 2 years, that's the only amount they allowed to raise it up. They can't raise it up more than that. It would have to be only that amount. And the only thing the person needs to have is proof that in the last 2 years, they've been a resident of that apartment. Let it be a W-2 form, medical insurance, bank statements, bills, anything that they can accumulate and show and prove that they've been in that apartment for the last 2 years will be able to leave them in that apartment. If the tenant that's leaving had Section 8, the tenant that's claiming the apartment should have always been, or at least for the last 2 years, been in the recertification process. So if the tenant has any subsidy and needs to be recertifying all the time, that particular tenant can stay there only if they've been in the recertification process. We have, for the new rent laws, we had a few other things going on. It's a little longer, but I'm going to share more information later on how to get in touch with me. And here on this slide, well, I have what we have seen, unfortunately, for the last 2 or 3 months of social distance and the rules and regulation, wash your hands. So we have all that information here on the slide also. We have here some numbers. We have here numbers because Eric also had a question. So when does this end with not paying rent on time, or are we paying rent? Well, it actually does end in June. It ends in June, but it's prolonged until August 20th. If the landlord harasses anyone to get their rent, that is against the law. Landlords can bring cases to the court June 20th. But we all know that there's been old cases that are going to be seen before the landlord starts bringing these cases in. Hopefully by then, we should have a clear answer to everything, because we don't know what landlords are going to do and what we're going to do. The government doesn't know. So as we go on and get new information, you guys can also feel free to contact me in Impact or anyone in Impact. But yeah, one of the questions was, is it true that the landlord can take us to court after June 6th? Well, landlord can take you to court after June 20th, but it doesn't mean that he's going to be successful. When the landlord does take the tenants to court, they should have proof that they can't pay the rent because they lost their job. And then I guess at that point, then we'll take it from there. Not even the courts know. Eric asked this question. I did a little research and reached out to our lawyers, and actually no one really knows what's going to happen after June 20th. So on June 20th, landlords are supposed to have the rights to go to court and take people to court for eviction, but how far they're going to go or what's going to happen at that point is uncertain. Unfortunate, it's a day-to-day with these laws. So Eric, I hope I answered your question to the best of my ability. There's other questions, I'll try to answer it. And if not, we have here the hotlines for Take Root Justice. It's an organization that has lawyers that we work very closely. We also have the number here for Housing Court Answers. So those questions are a little unpredictable. I don't want to answer something. First of all, I'm not a lawyer. And second of all, unfortunately, even the lawyers are not really certain what's going to happen after that day. So I'm sorry I didn't have more of a clear answer.
Virginia, there is at least one question I see here in the chat for you. Do you see that?
Let me look for it. I don't see it. Where
Virginia, the question is asking if a person lives in a rent stabilized apartment for 20 years and they're not on a lease, does that mean that they can get the lease if their roommate leaves?
Actually, they're not on the lease, but if they have proof that they've lived there for at least the last 2 years, yes, they could get on the lease. But there's also a form that DHCR has online that it's for succession rights. They can send a form to the city and they can send a form to the landlord. And that's just giving the landlord an idea that they are there and that they're willing to stay with the apartment if the roommate leaves. Did I answer that question? Or
I think so. There's another question here for you.
Okay.
What's the deal with preferential rent? Our landlord raised our rent up 15%, but was still within what they call preferential. Is that legal?
Fortunate preferential rent is legal, but it's changed now with the new rent laws. So preferential rent is the rent the landlord gives. It's a lower rent than the legal rent. Unfortunately, it looked really good in paper, but it's not something that's to the tenant's advantage, because then when the lease finishes, they bring it up to that. So it's not something that now it's actually illegal. So when the lease expires, then they could put the new law towards it. But if they sign a preferential rent before May 14, 2019, if they did a 2-year lease, they would have to stay with that lease for now. And with the preferential rent, it's kind of a little tricky, but that's when that particular tenant comes to impact, and we'll be able to, well, now we're working remotely, they'll be able to scan the lease, send it to us, we could take a look at it, then we'll get their rent history, and then we could start a case if they're overpaid or if they're being harassed or the landlord's doing something illegal. But it's a few steps that we have to take. First step is rent history. Next step is sharing your lease with us, that we could take a look at it, see your rent history, and tell you how you can fight this preferential rent.
Okay. Another question here. Where does one get a renewal form for a rent stabilized lease?
A renewal form, or I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question. So
I'm not sure what the term renewal form means, but a renewal for a sublease in a rent stabilized apartment, it looks like.
Okay, so unfortunately, if you're subleasing, it's rent stabilized apartment, we have to make sure that when we're gonna sublease an apartment, we have to make sure that the landlord is aware of that. So I'm not sure what the case is. If the landlord is aware that they sublease and agree to it, then it should be with the landlord.
All right. Amanda, can you let us know in the chat if that answers your question? Yep, we got a thumbs up.
Okay, great. I'm sorry. So here I have a slide also of unemployment, but Raquel did that amazing job. I guess I'm gonna skip this because it's not something that she didn't discuss. I'm gonna skip this. And here we have, on this slide, we have a group of organizations that are helping in the community. So these are, some of them are volunteers. They run errands, they get medication for tenants. So here's the name of some, and I am going to share this information also with Eric. So if anyone needs this, if they need to share it with the community or with anyone, so we have these resources that so at Impact, we've been doing not only housing, because we're doing actually surveys in the community to see what their needs are and to be able to share this resource, the resource that we know and we have knowledge of with the community. So this is part of what we're sharing with them. I'm sharing it with you, and I will be sharing it with Eric, and then Eric can work with me and we could. So it's this slide, and the next slide is the utilities and SNAP, human resource. So all the government services that we know, and I am familiar that you know, are out there. We have them, and we're sharing it with the community. That includes the health insurance. So we have it here also. And now I am open for questions. I did take a few questions. Here's my email address. Anybody who wants to email. I know also in Williamsburg, we have a lot of Latino families. So as Joe knows, I am Latina, so I speak English and Spanish. Anything that you need, that anyone needs, can reach me here to this email, and I'll be glad to help them. So if anyone has any other questions, I will be, I'm still here.
Yeah, we have one more question here. Can you receive SNAP if you have relocated?
Sure. You can receive SNAP if you relocated. Actually, there's people that I know of tenants that are on disability that instead of them contacting SNAP, SNAP contact them. Some emergency cases are open without all the documents, so that wouldn't be a problem. Everyone is entitled to receive SNAP, especially if they're in this time.
And what if someone hasn't received their SNAP benefits card? What should they do?
Unfortunately, they can call, but calling is not working. There is an email address. I don't know if that person does have that email address. There's an email address that will go straight to a social worker, and the social worker will call them. Doesn't necessarily is going to be their social worker or from their center. I think it's just a center that they set up for emergency.
Okay. A follow-up question on receiving SNAP if you've relocated. How do you prove your address if you've relocated?
They ask you to send them a copy of your ID. You can send them, you can scan a copy of your ID and send it to that email. If you don't have an ID with that new address, you would need a letter from the person you're living with, if you're living with someone, verifying that that's where you're staying.
That's it. Thank you very much, Virginia. And I want to thank all of our panelists who came today and really spent and gave us a lot of time and a lot of good advice. Impact, I see Craig's pictures up there too. I want to thank him for coming from Impact Brooklyn too. And the commissioner and Randy and Samara for all the good information. And I want to thank everybody who participated in tonight's event. And I hope we'll have more of this type. My office is not open because technically it's not an essential service according to the governor, but our office is open because you can reach us by telephone or by email, and my staff and I are available to my constituents all the time. So thank you all very much for coming tonight.
Thank you, Joe. It was my pleasure.
Rachel was fantastic, and I didn't mean to forget her, but I'm sure many of you took down her email address.
Thank you, Joe. Have a good night.
All right. Thanks, everyone.